In the golden age of Hollywood, when the American West dominated the silver screen and cowboys became kings of pop culture, few names rang louder or truer than Randolph Scott and Gabby Hayes. One was the picture of heroic restraint. Tall, handsome, calm under pressure, and rarely seen without his trusty revolver or that stoic squint. The other? A walking contradiction, bearded, toothless, loud, comical, and instantly recognizable as the eternal sidekick with a heart of gold. They were opposites in almost every way, leading man and comic relief, myth and man. But behind the dusty film reels and the black and white morality plays of Western cinema, there existed a quiet relationship that defied Hollywood norms. It wasn't built on publicity or headline moments. It wasn't manufactured in studios or preserved in press clippings. It was something deeper. Mutual respect, unspoken loyalty, and a shared devotion to the world they helped build, one frame at a time. For decades, fans speculated about the connection between these two titans of the Western frontier. They rode the same trails, shared the same sets, and shaped the same genre. Yet Gabby Hayes never spoke publicly about Randolph Scott. Not a whisper, not a hint. Some believed the silence meant distance. Others suspected a story worth hiding. But in the final years of his life, long after the cameras stopped rolling and the horses were put to pasture, Gabby Hayes finally broke that silence. Not for gossip, not for legacy, but because sometimes the truth waits for the right moment to be told. And when it came, it wasn't scandal that emerged, it was reverence. This is the untold story of a rugged sidekick and a reluctant hero, and how one man's quiet influence helped shape not only a career, but an entire legend of the American West. Gabby Hayes wasn't born into show business. He was born into dust, labor, and family responsibility. George Francis Hayes entered the world on May 7, 1885, in the modest Hayes Hotel in Stannard's, New York, a hamlet not even big enough to make most maps. He was the third of 7 children in a family anchored by his father, Clark Hayes, a man who managed oil production and ran the very hotel where young Gabby took his first breath. It was a hard life, but hardship breeds stories, and Hayes became a collector of both. Whether listening to drifters in the hotel lobby or learning from the oil men who worked with his father, he became a sponge for character, dialect, and detail. Those seeds would eventually bloom into his legendary screen presence. As a teenager, Hayes was already chasing life with both fists. He joined the circus, learning timing, performance, and how to engage an unpredictable audience. He played semi-professional baseball, not because he dreamed of fame, but because he loved competition, camaraderie, and the rhythm of teamwork. All of these early experiences taught him to read people, to adapt, and to entertain. In 1914, he met the love of his life, Olive Ireland. Together, they formed a vaudeville act that toured the country for decades. They had no children, but their bond was unshakable. Olive wasn't just his partner in performance. She was his moral compass, emotional anchor, and the person who made his career possible. They lived modestly but happily, building a shared life on the road until the Great Depression shattered their financial security. In his 40s, Hayes had planned to retire. Instead, the 1929 stock market crash pulled the rug out from under them. With few options, Hayes turned to the one industry booming in desperate times: the movies. It was a gamble. He was older than most newcomers. He wasn't a handsome leading man, but Hollywood didn't just need stars, it needed characters. And Gabby Hayes had character to spare. Hayes arrived in Hollywood at a time of transition, the end of silent films, the rise of talkies, and the growing appetite for westerns. He began with small roles, background parts, nameless cowpokes, and grizzled bartenders. But a chance meeting with producer T.M. Carr changed everything. Carr saw something in Hayes, a twinkle, a mischief, a spark that leapt off the screen. Over the next 6 years, Carr cast Hayes in over 30 films. Hayes leaned hard into the Western archetype, even though he had never ridden a horse before his 40s. He learned quickly, adopting the persona of the rambling old-timer with sayings like "dadgummit" and "consarn it," phrases that would become part of American pop culture. From 1935 to 1939, Hayes played Wendy Halliday, sidekick to Hopalong Cassidy, but a salary dispute with Paramount Pictures led him to Republic, where he reinvented himself as Gabby Whitaker. The name stuck. From 1939 to 1946, he appeared in over 40 films, becoming a fixture in westerns alongside Roy Rogers' 44 films, Gene Autry, 7 films, Wild Bill Elliott, 14 films, and of course, John Wayne, 15 films. But one name was always spoken differently, more quietly with a sense of respect: Randolph Scott. For decades, Gabby Hayes kept silent about Randolph Scott. It wasn't just professional courtesy, it was intentional. In an era where tabloids clawed for scandal and studios manufactured feuds for publicity, Hayes opted for quiet dignity. He wasn't one to chase attention off-screen. And when it came to Randolph Scott, he chose silence over spectacle. That silence only deepened the mystery. Fans speculated, film historians wondered. They had shared screens, ridden together in dusty backlots, and helped carry the Western genre through its golden age. But Hayes never commented, not at premieres, not in interviews, not even in retirement. The lack of words became a story in itself. And then, one day, the silence cracked. In a rare late-life interview, Gabby Hayes finally spoke. Not for drama, not for fame, but because time has a way of loosening even the tightest-held truths. Randolph wasn't the type to brag or draw attention to himself, Hayes said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. He let his work do the talking, and boy, could he work. Hayes described Scott not just as a colleague, but as a man built on principle. While others in Hollywood reveled in the excesses of fame, Scott moved differently. He was always prepared, always professional, always kind. He didn't boast. He didn't politic. He showed up, hit his marks, and delivered with quiet intensity. There were plenty of folks in this town who wore hats and acted like cowboys, Hayes chuckled. But Randolph, he carried it in his soul. Hayes recalled the way Scott would arrive to set early, rehearsing lines alone while others mingled. He'd stay late, helping younger actors with blocking or calming a nervous newcomer. He rarely socialized at parties, but would send handwritten notes to crew members who'd lost family. These were things no camera ever captured, but Gabby did. He noticed. And, perhaps most importantly, he remembered. He was the kind of man you didn't forget, Hayes said, even when he wasn't in the room. Despite appearing in the same cinematic universe, wide prairies, saloon brawls, and shootouts at high noon, Gabby Hayes and Randolph Scott rarely shared the same frame. Unlike Hayes' many team-ups with Roy Rogers or John Wayne, his on-screen time with Scott was limited. But off-screen, something far more meaningful was unfolding. We didn't need to talk much, Hayes reflected. Sometimes the best friendships are built in silence. They were different in almost every way. Scott, the dignified Southern gentleman. Hayes, the brash, bearded jester of the West. But under the surface, they had more in common than anyone realized. Both were fiercely private. Both detested phony Hollywood politics. And both believed that the Western wasn't just a genre, it was a way of life. What many fans never knew is that Scott was instrumental in reshaping Hayes' career. According to Hayes, it was Randolph Scott who convinced several producers to take a chance on using older character actors in recurring roles, not just for comic relief, but to bring texture, history, and truth to their Western landscapes. Randolph believed the West was more than just young, fast-talking gunslingers, Hayes said. It was about the old-timers, too. The prospectors, the widowers, the pioneers who'd seen the land before fences went up. He saw value in people like me. That one push, quiet and uncredited, opened doors. Hayes went from being background filler to a scene-stealing regular. Producers began to write parts specifically for him, not because he was the funny old guy, but because he gave depth to the world. Without Scott's advocacy, Hayes believed he might have been forgotten by the industry by the mid-1930s. It wasn't just a career boost, it was a form of protection. Hayes knew that in Hollywood, once you aged or lost your looks, the roles dried up. Scott saw that pattern and tried to change it. Not loudly, not publicly, but effectively. I owe him more than most folks know, Gabby admitted. He made sure people like me had a place in the story. And while they rarely exchanged long conversations, Hayes said they shared something even deeper than words: trust. I always knew where I stood with Randolph, he said, and that's more than I can say for half the folks in this town. Away from the screen, Gabby Hayes was almost nothing like his characters. In real life, he was articulate, well-read, and gentle. He loved literature, quiet evenings, and deep conversations, things his grizzled sidekick persona would never allow. After Olive's death in 1957, Hayes retreated to their ranch in Tuca Lake, California, a sanctuary where he could grieve privately. But age and health soon made ranch life difficult. He relocated to an apartment building he owned, another quiet act of financial wisdom in an era when most actors died broke. Despite his fame, he stayed humble. Neighbors remember him as approachable, kind, even grandfatherly. He didn't flaunt his legacy, he simply lived it. In 1969, at age 83, Gabby Hayes passed away from complications related to heart disease. He was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Hollywood Hills Cemetery, among legends. Gabby Hayes may have left the screen behind in the 1950s, but America never really let him go. His legacy, carved with laughter and grit, endured far beyond his final film appearance and in the decades that followed his passing. The tributes only grew louder, more creative, and more heartfelt. From 1983 to 1989, his hometown of Wellsville, New York, transformed into a living tribute with Gabby Hayes Days, a multi-day festival complete with street fairs, square dancing, horse parades, and Gabby look-alike contests. People of all ages, children, adults, and even seniors, donned beards, 10-gallon hats, and vests. For a few magical days, each July, an entire town relived the golden age of Westerns, not in irony, but in pure celebration. At the heart of the event was more than nostalgia, it was pride. Gabby Hayes wasn't just a movie star, he was theirs. A boy from a small hamlet who became a national treasure, a man who made people laugh, and in doing so, became timeless. The celebration even extended to the great outdoors. Since 1969, the Gabby Hayes Memorial Trout Fishing Tournament has taken place each year in Kettle Creek, Pennsylvania. What began as a modest gathering has become an annual rite of passage, where fishing rods and storytelling meet in honor of a man who embodied the spirit of both. Hollywood didn't forget him either. Mel Brooks famously immortalized him in Blazing Saddles with the character Gabby Johnson, a bearded townsman delivering a hilariously indecipherable speech in authentic frontier gibberish. That single moment, absurd, charming, and unforgettable, was a comic love letter to the very monologues Hayes once delivered straight-faced in B-Westerns. The audience laughed, but it was also a salute to an icon who made that gibberish poetic. Pixar followed suit with a more subtle tribute. In 1999's Toy Story 2, Stinky Pete the Prospector bore Hayes' DNA, from his voice to his costume to the layers beneath the performance. On screen, Pete is silly and eccentric, like Gabby's roles, but as a toy, he's articulate, intelligent, and even philosophical. A wink to the real-life Gabby Hayes, who read Shakespeare, managed real estate, and lived far removed from the clown he played on screen. Then came late-night television. On The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, Gabby lived again through impersonation and admiration. Carson's skit, alongside Roy Rogers, paid tribute with warmth and respect. Gabby's legacy had become part of America's cultural language. He was a punchline with depth, a memory with legs, a man who left a bigger footprint than most stars ever dared. Even long after his death, Hayes' face appeared on memorabilia, tribute rifles, commemorative books, and in film retrospectives. 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame honor him, one for television, one for radio, because one simply wasn't enough. His legacy wasn't just preserved, it was cherished. In the end, Gabby Hayes' long-held silence wasn't a shield, it was a sign of respect. And when he finally spoke, what emerged wasn't a headline-making expose, but a quiet, heartfelt tribute to a man who didn't need to be loud to leave a deep impression. Through Hayes' eyes, Randolph Scott comes into sharper focus, not just as a Western star, but as a human being. A man of principles, a man who preferred doing to saying, a man who helped others without seeking credit, who showed up prepared, who believed in authenticity over artifice. In Hollywood, that kind of character was rare. On the frontier, real or fictional, it was everything. Hayes' words offer us more than just clarity. They offer contrast. In an industry of larger-than-life egos, here were 2 men who understood the value of humility. One entertained with humor, the other with honor. One made you laugh, the other made you believe. Together, they helped forge the very myth of the American cowboy. and yet they did so without ever needing to be the center of attention off-screen. Today, their legacies continue to ripple through time, in tribute festivals, in parody and satire, in animated films and old reruns, in rifles etched with gold and children's comic books, and perhaps most meaningfully, in the hearts of the fans who grew up watching them and the filmmakers still inspired by their spirit. Gabby Hayes and Randolph Scott may not have shared the spotlight, but they shared something far more enduring, a trail paved in loyalty, dignity, and timeless Americana. They were riders on the same path, even if history wrote their names on different marquees. And now, with the silence broken and the story told, we see that the bond between them was as real as the legends they played. Somewhere in the dust-blown dreams of cinema's past, they still ride, one cracking wise, the other riding tall, both icons of a world that never truly fades. Because when the dust settles and the screen fades to black, legends, true legends, don't disappear. They ride on.